Fashion. What is it really? Fashion can be anything that people want, like this, or even that. Fashion is defined as a popular trend, but where do the trends start? Well, usually they start on the runway and then they trickle down into celebrity wear and then to everyday people. But sometimes they can start with the everyday people who influence the runway. Let's talk about the runway a little and where it all started. In 1910, the first fashion show that we know of made its big debut, showing fashion from Charles Worth, Paul Kret, and Yves Saint Laurent. These visionaries were the birth of a new culture for those to express themselves through the cloth. Now moving on to the 20s and 30s, where Coco Chanel made her breakthrough, giving freedom to women in their closets. No more unbreathable stuck-up dresses, but instead new sports-inspired silhouettes that were for every woman to enjoy comfortable living. This was a revolutionary time for new, comfier fashion. Now, in 1940 and 50, we start to speak more with clothing than wear it on the runways. Elsa Springlee was an artist that was fascinated with surrealism art and found a way to portray it in her clothing. She broke norms and gave clothes a new art form that we can still see today. Other names like Christian Dior and Pierre Balmain gave the same new face to clothing and they gave new life to fashion after World War II, creating the new look, moving people out of their wartime wardrobe. Moving on from these trying times, we have Hubert Givenchy making his movement into the early 60s. He introduced the idea of not only putting pretty faces on the runway, but putting pretty famous faces on the runway. Saint Laurent followed in his footsteps in the 70s, implementing trench coats, pantsuits, and tuxedos into women's clothing. The 80s and 90s were a fresh start to everything, with bold new forms of comfort and simplistic styles being showcased by artists like Boy London and Body Map. Artisans were fighting the over-the-top formality and pushing for expressionism in everyday clothing. Now, the 80s and 90s are what 2K20 and 21 have been all about. We can see this theme throughout the 20th century called recycling fashion. This is where we take the old and call it new or slap a label of vintage on it to create trends. We see no exceptions to this on the runway as 80s and 90s inspired outfits all over name brands, big labels as they try to advertise new and comfy fashion. So without the old, we can't have the new, but we haven't seen new in a while. 2000s has really been under this recycler's mindset. Within the first 10 years of 2000s, we were calling back to the 70s with our outrageous color combos and ever-loving crazy hairstyles. Then from 2010, 2015, we kind of gave up. Fashion slowly degraded down into color blocking and body shaping, and clothes just became bland. Then we started to get influenced by Barbie Pink, and that was a letdown for everyone. Then in 2018, something started up in everyone's mind at the same time to bring back bold colors, blocky shoulders, and emotions back into clothing. Yes, I think you know where I'm going with this. 70s were back in style, baby. And booming new lines from every big brand name throwing out words to make the 70s look like a whole new world. Mixing future fashion with old, creating a whole new genre. We can see this new genre of future fashion seeping through the cracks of trends today, trying to make new and give new and personal individuality into clothing. So all that leaves is you. What is fashion to you? Do you push the boundaries? Do you follow trends, or are you a trendsetter?